Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 1 of my November wrap-up. I know this is going up late for various reasons, I'm not going to get into it, but the first book I finished was I guess it's a single issue. I don't do a lot of comics, so I don't know exactly, but I think it is issue number 1 of Earthdivers by Stephen Graham Jones, and also David Gianfelice and Joanna Lafuente. By the way, all of the links, people I mention, live shows, and content warnings will be in the description box. So as I said, this is number 1 in a speculative series that I am really excited to continue. So we are following primarily one character who is part of a group of Native American characters, and this is set in the far future, like a far dystopian future basically, where there has been a huge climate crisis that is especially, I think it's especially affecting the US, but it's just pretty much widespread climate catastrophe, and this group of characters end up getting the technology to go back in time, and they decide that the only way that they can avert this catastrophic end to America is if they go back in time and basically stop the colonization of America. So they want to go back and kill Christopher Columbus, and we follow our main male character. I'm sorry, I don't have the book with me, so I don't remember his name, but as he starts that journey, and I really liked this. This is super interesting. I really like the way it's handling these themes. We're already starting to see the ethics that come up with this, because our main character starts off and he's like, okay, the only person I'm going to hurt, that I'm going to kill, is Christopher Columbus himself. I'm not going to do that to anybody else. But then he gets there and he's like, okay, well, I need to get close enough to Christopher Columbus to kill him and to save the world, basically, and to save all these people in the future. So maybe I do have to kill this person for the greater good, and that's already really interesting. I'm sure that's going to continue in the rest of the series. But I really liked this. I had read a short story from Stephen Graham Jones that I really, really hated. It was just very much not my thing. I don't know that I would like his full-length novels either, but this comic at least I am really enjoying, and I gave that 4 stars. Next I finished a picture book, and that was Berry Song by Michaela Goad. It's written and illustrated by Michaela Goad, and this is just absolutely gorgeous. I think if there was any doubt, this really solidifies that Michaela Goad is one of my favorite picture book creators. She also illustrated We Are Water Protectors, which I absolutely loved. Yeah, this is just so stunning, and it's about a young girl and her grandmother is teaching her to collect berries, and so there's a lot of focus on family connection and cultural practices and gratitude to the land, and this is just so beautiful, and it's a very peaceful and healing feeling book. I absolutely loved it. I also like that the author does include a little bit about safety, it's make sure that you are collecting berries with somebody who knows which ones are safe to eat, because there's a lot that aren't, that are poisonous. I just thought this was absolutely fantastic. I gave Berry Song 5 stars, would highly recommend this to people of any age. I just thought this was incredible. Next, I finished Bitterblue by Kristen Kishore. This was a reread. This is the 3rd book in the Graceling series. So this was part of our Graceling read-along that I am hosting along with Mel from A Book Fiend Named Mel and Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. I will link our live show down below. I am loving this reread so much. So this is the 3rd book in the series. It is a companion series, and our main character is Bitterblue. And we are following her as she... this book is a lot about the attempted healing after a time of terrible suffering, and how you do that with a whole kingdom, a whole country. And Bitterblue being put in this position that she's really doing her best, but she's not given a lot of information. She's really struggling to understand how she can best help people, and I can't get into too many specifics about the story because this is the 3rd book in a series, but I loved this. Once again, I love Bitterblue so much. I love all of Kristen Kishore's main female characters. Yeah. And I every successive one, I'm do I love this one even more than the others? I just feel for her so much. I admire her determination and her intelligence and her very quiet kind of strength, and getting to see her realize that she is strong. I love that one of her strengths is basically her empathy and her ability to love, and her determination to use that love as a physical force almost. I really love the supporting characters as well. The female friendships in here are great. I love the themes of this book and this series about, as I said, healing and moving on from trauma, and how knowledge is the absolutely necessary first step to even begin to heal from things. But then also the way that Kristen Kishore balances that with the possibility that sometimes like you like taking care of yourself sometimes means not like steeping yourself in this suffering and these like this like information. I'm not doing a very good job explaining it because I obviously don't want to spoil, but yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I know that a lot of people feel like this book is too confusing, and I do understand that. I didn't find it that way, and I also know people found it like kind of slow or boring, and I didn't find it that way either. Even though this was a reread, I was so engaged with like the mystery aspects, like the way that Bitterblue is trying to figure out like who is keeping information from her, why they are, if somebody is even doing that deliberately, like just trying to understand her place in this kingdom and getting to know more about like the world she lives in and what she can do to help people, like using her privilege for good. I loved this so much. Really one of the only like negative things for me with this book is there was a romance subplot that the first time I read this book I really loved, and this time I had like absolutely no feelings about it. Like I didn't really care about that character at all, which was kind of a bummer, but everything else was so fantastic that I still gave Bitterblue 5 stars. I also think this is really hilarious because this is the first time I've reread this book, and I had remembered that there was a particular character that I really, really loved like the character arc for, and I also remembered like loving the romance subplot of this book. And so apparently in the several years since I first read this book, I combined those things in my head, and so I thought that that character was a love interest. And so the whole time this book was happening, I'm like, wow, this is like a really slow build. Like this is very subtle, and it's like, it was not that subtle, Kara. Like you just were completely wrong about the love interest, like the person who was the love interest. So that was fun. But yeah, I loved this. Next, I finished Notable Native People, 50 Indigenous Leaders, Dreamers, and Changemakers from Past and Present by Adrienne Keene. This is one of those like collected like nonfiction books that are intended for younger readers, but are fantastic for anybody. I love this. I never get tired of these kinds of books, and I really appreciate the diversity and the breadth here. There's a lot of different Native nations that are talked about, and there's a lot of different like kinds of leaders. There are, you know, culture keepers, there are politicians, there are artists, there are activists. Like I really like that. And I also appreciate that it seemed to be like there was an especial emphasis on Native Alaskan people and on Kanaka Maoli people, or Native Hawaiian people. I think that's especially important because, at least in my experience, I feel like non-Native Americans aren't as likely to know about those nations as opposed to some other Native nations. So I really liked that, but I thought this was fantastic. Definitely recommend it, and I gave Notable Native People 5 stars. Oh, and you could probably tell this, but I really loved the art and the design for this book. I thought it was beautiful, and I also like that there are little sections throughout. Like most of it is the biographies, the short biographies, but there are also sections throughout about different like important issues about like Native identity, things like determining citizenship, and then also there's a huge focus obviously in this book on the fact that like Native people are still obviously present today, and like the like historical issues and how those like have an impact on today. So I thought this was great. Next, I finished A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. This is a collection of essays that I have been wanting to read for a long time. I heard incredible things about it, and yeah, unsurprisingly, I loved this. I'm actually gonna probably struggle to talk about it because it does so much so effectively. So Alicia Elliott is a Mohawk writer, and the title of this book, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground, comes from a translation of one of the words in the Mohawk language for depression. So one of the things that this book deals with is depression and mental illness. We also hear a lot about Alicia Elliott's life and her experience having a Native father and a white mother, and like the mental illness like that her mother had, and like her like home life, and like all of the like the ways that her family were targeted by child protective services and instead of like being actually helped, and the way that those things are weaponized against families of color. Yeah, like the back of the book says, engages with such wide-ranging topics as race, parenthood, love, art, mental illness, poverty, sexual assault, gentrification, and representation. Throughout, she makes thrilling connections both large and small between the past and present, the personal and political. And I think that's a great way to describe this book. One of the things that I am just so incredibly impressed by is how well written this was, how like beautiful and engaging it was, but also very clear. So I think even if you're not somebody who reads a lot of nonfiction or memoirs, I think this is still very approachable, while also being very deep and very thoughtful. And as it says, balances like large and small and past and present. I think Alicia Elliott does a fantastic job of talking about Native history, the things that like white Americans and Canadians have done to Native peoples, and connecting those directly to ongoing issues in the present. And I'm hopeful that maybe some people might pick up this book and not, you know, some people maybe who aren't completely convinced of that, you know, like, oh, well, that's in the past. Like, I understand that we did a lot of bad things, but that's in the past. And I'm hopeful that if their mind is maybe a little bit open to the possibility of being changed, I think this book maybe could do it, because I think she makes those connections so well. And then I also think the balance of the memoir parts and the history parts were perfect. Like, I can't say enough wonderful things about this. This is a brilliantly done nonfiction book. There are so many, like, I need to reread this and tab it, because there are just so many thoughtful and incisive things that she says. Again, she does a great job conveying feelings and tone, but also being very clear in her language. She also has some like really, really interesting ideas. Like, there was one that was so fascinating, like one essay on basically like the fact that like talking about trauma and being forced to acknowledge it is pretty much one of the only, like, it's widely recognized as like you have to do this in order to heal from something. And the way that she talks about how maybe that's not true, and maybe the reasons that we think that's the only way to heal from something, just, this is fantastic. I've rambled about it a lot, but if you haven't read this yet, I would highly recommend it. And I give A Mind Spread Out on the Ground 5 stars. Next, unfortunately, I had a bit of a disappointment, or more than a bit, I guess. I read The Garden of Lost Secrets by A.M. Howell. This was the second chance for this author because I was also very disappointed in the previous book I read from her. And yeah, I don't think she's an author for me, unfortunately. A.M. Howell is compared to Emma Carroll, and I do understand, like, I think it makes sense that there would be a lot of crossover appeal with these two authors' books, and like, A.M. Howell is a very well-liked author. Like, the reviews for these books are very good, so I'm not like steering people away from this. I just think for me, I feel like the way Emma Carroll does historical middle grade mysteries is a lot better. I just like them a lot more. So I'm really sad about this one. So this is set in 1916. Our main character, Clara, has been sent to stay with her aunt and uncle because England is obviously at war. This is during the Great War, or World War I, and she gets sent to this manor. And then she sees like this mysterious boy in the garden who's like not supposed to be there. So she's like, is he a ghost? Like, what's going on? And so Clara ends up like kind of getting pulled into this mystery and trying to figure out who this boy is. And she also has a secret about her brother fighting in the war, and she's like struggling to, you know, figure out how she can tell people, or if she should tell people. And then also she's not really getting along with her aunt as much as she thought. Like, her aunt seems very different, very changed. And yeah, I'm just really disappointed in this book. There were things that I liked about it. I really liked the writing style, and I liked some of the family moments between Clara and like eventually her aunt and uncle. Like, I think some of those were done really well, or like I really liked them. But there were a lot of things I didn't like about this. For one thing, I just found this very boring. Like, even the mystery aspect I was only like marginally interested in because it was basically the only thing happening. I also think the characters were super flat. I don't love the way some of the like plot of like the mystery aspect was handled. Like, I just was very, very disappointed in this one. I do feel like there were some interesting like historical aspects here, and one of the blurbs calls this a wonderfully atmospheric story. There is like a little bit of atmosphere that I liked, but overall I just was like really, really underwhelmed by this one, which is honestly sometimes like a more frustrating experience than a book that I outright dislike, because the premise of this could have been great. I feel like it really had the potential to be great, and for me it just wasn't. So I gave The Garden of Lost Secrets 3 stars, even though, I don't know, it feels maybe like it should be lower, but it didn't actively like anger me, you know, or like offend me in ways that, you know, 2 stars or 2.5 star books usually do. So tentatively this is 3 stars, and like I said at the beginning, I wouldn't like recommend people not read it. I just think A.M. Howell is not an author for me. Next, I finished Sacagawea by Joseph Bruchac, and I am actually not going to be reviewing this book right away. I'm sure you guys are aware that the HarperCollins Union is currently on strike, and they are not asking people to like boycott authors or boycott buying books that are put out by HarperCollins or their imprints. They're not saying that. They don't want they don't want people to, you know, hurt the authors, because that's part of what they're fighting for as well, is like fair wages for authors and for everybody. But they are asking that people not enter into new contracts with HarperCollins, and if possible they are asking for reviewers to hold their reviews until they get fair wages and until they get the very reasonable things that they're asking for. I will link some info down below. I am going to be reviewing this book in the future, but not at the moment. Next, I finally finished The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. I cannot find who this translator is. Like, I love this edition, like the design of it. It's like this old Borders edition that I found at a used bookstore, but I could not find the translator of this edition anywhere. I looked online too, so I unfortunately don't know who translated this, but this was translated from the Italian, of course. And according to Goodreads, I have been reading this for like 2.5 months, because what happened was we specifically read Inferno, Dante's Inferno, as one of our Pasta Classics picks. I will link that live show down below. So I made sure that I had finished that in time for the live show, and I was thinking that like I would want to read the whole thing before the live show. That didn't happen, but I did finish the part I needed to, and then I just kind of put this down. And yeah, it took me a while. Like I read this very sporadically, but I did finally finish it. And this was like a very interesting experience. I'm definitely glad I read it, but this was one of those books, like I read a lot of classics and like I feel like comfortable reading classics, but this is one of the ones where I feel like my comprehension or engagement varied quite a bit. So maybe I was trying to read it too fast at points, but there were just parts that felt very overwritten. There were some really, really beautiful passages. There were definitely some quotes that I loved. There were some very like profound and like beautiful ideas and images. So I did like parts of the writing a lot, but then there were a lot of other parts that were just needlessly over descriptive, like several long ornate sentences that are basically just there to say that like Dante was looking at his shadow. Like I'm not exaggerating, that is one of the examples. But I haven't even told you like the premise for this. I feel like everyone knows what this is about. But our main character, this is like an epic poem. And so our main character is basically a version of Dante the author. Like he even uses the same name and everything. And he has like a series of experiences where he's guided by the Roman poet Virgil through like the layers of hell. So Inferno, and then through Purgatory or Purgatorio, and then into Paradiso, or Paradise or Heaven. And the reason this is happening is because a woman that Dante loved, who is based on a woman of the same name that Dante loved in real life, named Beatrice or Beatrice, she has kind of like intervened and asked God and the angels for like some special dispensation to help Dante, because I guess he's been going astray. And yeah, this is about like his travels. And as I said, this was a very interesting and mixed experience. I talked about the writing already. I do think this is a really fascinating look at like the ethics of this particular time and place and what was considered like the greatest sins and everything. I thought that was super interesting. Like I think it's a very like interesting, kind of odd that like the lowest, you know, the worst circle of hell, which is reserved for deceivers, basically puts like the killers of Julius Caesar on the same level as Judas Iscariot. I just think that's interesting. But like as a like historical look at the ethics of the time period, I think this is really interesting. And there were also some parts that I was like pleasantly surprised by. Like there is a lot of this book that is very like of its time, in terms of the way it talks about various issues and groups of people, so do know that going in. But there, like I said, there were parts that surprised me. Like, we're told several times that Virgil, because he was a pagan, is not ever going to get to paradise, even though he was a good person. But then there are also parts where that seems to be contradicted, which I liked. I thought that was really interesting, and again, that surprised me. And I was also surprised at the amount of like equality in terms of the men and women that Dante comes across. Like the sins that people committed were not like stereotypically on gender lines, which I thought was really interesting. That wasn't what I expected. This book in general just wasn't what I expected. Like I knew the very, very basic setup, but I didn't really know like what it was going to be like reading it. Also some of the images, of course, are really famous, really interesting. Like the fact that the worst circle of hell, the worst part of hell, is cold. It's like bitter, biting cold. I think that is really fascinating. And like just some of the imagery was really interesting. Like that's very different from like, you know, the kind of traditional Western view of what hell would look like. So yeah, just a very interesting book. I have like mixed feelings about it. I definitely missed a lot of things about this, but it's not one I'd want to reread anytime soon, just because it's kind of exhausting. Like it is a lot of like mental work to read this, but I am very glad I did. There are parts I really liked. Also, I know everybody apparently agrees that Inferno is like the best part, but I personally, like, even though there were parts of Inferno that were like really interesting and engaging, I also liked some other parts in Purgatorio and Paradiso. Like there's a section in Purgatorio where like Beatrice is basically like confronting Dante about about his actions, and I liked that. I thought that was just a really interesting scene, really good scene. Oh, and I forgot to mention, like, one of the other things that made this book hard to read is like there is so much of this that is like very, very specific Italian politics, like very specific references. And like some of it was kind of funny because like Dante would be in the middle of, you know, there's like really important journey like through the afterlife, and then he'd like get into this fight with somebody who's like being tortured because like they're from opposing Italian cities, and he's like, yeah, well, your city is worse, your city is stupid, mine is the best. And it was just like very interesting juxtaposition there, but like the intense specificity of some of these references was kind of a little off-putting. Like it made it hard to stay engaged with some parts of this book, and to like understand what was going on at parts. So anyway, very mixed experience, but I did give The Divine Comedy 3 stars. Okay, everybody, so those were the first group of books I read in November. Please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. And let me know if you've had an author lately where it's like you just feel like you should love them, like the premises of their books sound like you'd love them, but you just aren't getting on with them. Because unfortunately, I think I need to give up on A.M. Howell. I just don't think she's an author for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!